Hello everyone! If you're returning to the channel, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Lizelle and I am the creator of the modern fantasy webcomic The Sorcerer of Awakening, which will be the focus of today's video. At the time this video goes live, we will have just celebrated the 6-month anniversary of The Sorcerer of Awakening. It's been a fun ride and I look forward to sharing more of the story with you all. If you saw the last video, I mentioned that it took me 20 years to get to this point. This story was originally going to be a 6-book novel series, with each book having Julian, Jin, and their friends traveling to a different nation in the world I've created in their quest to awaken the gods. I wrote the first book and started querying agents, but I couldn't land one. I quickly realized that if I went down the traditional publishing route, I likely wouldn't be able to add illustrations or do my own cover art. I then realized the story works best in a visual form. Having gotten out of a drawing dry spell, I then decided I wanted to make this a comic. Over the years, I've had lots of story and artistic inspiration as I developed the story and figured out my artistic style. So what were those inspirations? How did they influence the comic? Stick around and find out. So, before we begin, let me share with you what I'm drawing. The weather lately has been pretty crappy. It's the kind of weather where you just want to curl up in a blanket with a hot beverage and fuzzy pajamas and just relax. While doing just that, I got inspired to draw Julian doing the same thing. If you see that there is suddenly a background, I reused the background of the first panel of the first page of Chapter 4. Work smarter, not harder, I say. At the posting of this video, we're a few weeks away from finishing Chapter 2, so congrats! You get a teeny tiny sneak peek at Chapter 4, which will be posted later in 2026. And with that, let's get to talking about the comic's inspiration. Let's start off with the main characters Julian Cartio and Jin Atrezo. A long time ago in the early 2000s, I was part of a roleplay IRC chat community online with my friends that took inspiration from The Legend of Zelda, musical theater, anime, and video games. Julian, much like in the comic, was an aspiring knight for his home kingdom. He discovered he had light magic by accident after fending off an attack from enemy forces. When I first developed him, he was actually a bit of a jerk, but he quickly mellowed out into someone who was kind and courageous. He wasn't the first character I created for this world my friends and I created, but he quickly became one of my favorites. Jin, on the other hand, was a sorcerer fleeing from 2 other sorcerers who wanted to use him to awaken an ancient dark force that resided in his soul. He eventually found refuge in a neighboring kingdom and became friends with a ragtag group that worked to defend the land. While their origins were reworked for my story, I kept their personalities and the bare bones of their backstories. I don't want to give too much away about how much I kept, since that's actually spoilers for the story. Once we're a few chapters in, I'll be able to speak more on that. I can say, though, that in the roleplay, Julian and Jin rarely interacted with each other. In the comic, they're best friends and consider each other brothers with how close they and their families are. The other characters we've seen in the comic so far are Julian's family. That hasn't changed too much except for some names and the importance of Julian's father to the comic. In the roleplay, Julian's parents' names were Paulo and Keisha. Now they're Paul and Elena. No real reason for the name changes, I just thought they sounded better. Elena didn't have much of a backstory other than being Julian's mother. Paul, on the other hand, had a drastic change. Before, he was just the inspiration for Julian to become a knight to follow in his footsteps, and he died early on from an illness. For the comic, Paul's role has significantly increased, with him now being widely known as the hero who slew the 2 sorcerers that caused the Madala attack 23 years ago, thus kicking off the comic's main story. Julian's brothers didn't really change at all, minus one name. Their professions are still the same. Tom, the oldest, is a blacksmith and owns his own shop. Tristan, Julian's second oldest brother, owns a boutique in town. Skylar, the younger brother, is finishing up high school and wants to go to medical school. Timmy, the youngest, is just a free-spirited child. There are more characters to meet and discover, including the villains of the story. We're at the point in the comic now where the first real threat to Julian has appeared. If you're interested in seeing who they are and how Julian will handle them, head over to soa-comic.com, link in the description. 2 of the baddies that you see on this page were inspired, believe it or not, by birds. The man with the scar on his face was inspired by a Canadian goose. They're abundant in my area and they are the worst. They hiss, they bite, they chase you, and they stare you down as they block traffic. 2 of them tried to murder my mother and me in the mall parking lot a few years ago. They charged at us, then flew directly at our faces. I hate those homicidal birds. I actually drew this comic of Jin years ago after that incident, and I had some fun with it. The guy with the long red braid and goatee? He was inspired by this evil, evil rooster that attacked me twice when I was at a petting zoo. The damn bird was hiding in the bushes and stalking me and came out of nowhere and darted at my ankles. I hate that bird, and I hope it became somebody's dinner. 2 evil birds, 2 evil men. There you go. Okay, that's enough about evil birds. Let's talk about the story. The bare bones of the story were developed pretty easily. I knew I wanted Julian and Jin to meet new friends and travel around the world to squash evil, but I needed more than that. Some of the best advice I've heard from other writers and creatives is to create what you want to read. It's okay to have your story be as self-indulgent as you want. So, what are some of my favorite stories that I currently love that have helped influence the development of the Sorcerer of Awakening? First off, I'm glad this video is coming out when it is, because we're currently celebrating the 40th anniversary of my all-time favorite series, The Legend of Zelda. I love the characters, I love the lore, I love the exploration, the puzzles, and how the games tie into each other. I get excited when a new game gets announced. I become a hermit when it gets released so I can immerse myself in it. Just like the Zelda series, I wanted to create deep lore for my world. Fun fact, but a bunch of my friends over the years have mistaken Julian for Link just because of the hair and the fact that Julian wears green. So for this year, I was like, you know what? Fine. Here's a picture of Julian as Link. Magic is a big part of my story, and it took me a bit to figure out how the magic system would work. Some games that helped inspire me with its creation were Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy, and, surprisingly, Pokemon. The types of spells, how different types were stronger and weaker against others, all helped me figure out what I wanted magic to be capable of in my world, how it's wielded, and what its limitations are. And also how the rules can be broken. Gotta crack an egg to make an omelet, right? Avatar: The Last Airbender is another great series. The character development and world building are among the best out there for animated series. Their approach to bending as their magic system and their emphasis on balance helped guide me in the early development of the comic. Before any of you ask, I only saw a few episodes of The Legend of Korra, so I don't really have an opinion on the show. While I've admittedly not watched a lot of movies, I have watched about half of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films and read some of the comics. I've always been more of a DC fan growing up, especially with Batman, but the quality and flow of the earlier MCU films were fantastic. Seeing how threatening villains like Thanos could be, heroes fighting impossible odds and still coming out on top, and, of course, the fight scenes, made the gears in my head turn. As soon as I got home from the theaters, I would immediately start sketching in my sketchbook or typing out different scenes inspired by what I just saw. Gemstones are another inspiration and will play a major role in the story. If you've played Ocarina of Time, you'll remember that Link had to collect spiritual stones as a child and medallions from the sages as an adult. That always stuck with me even as I started developing the story. I decided that Julian and his friends needed to collect medallions with gemstones in them as part of this quest to awaken the gods. Julian even wears one of those medallions around his neck and has a sunstone in the center. When figuring out what stones I wanted to be on the medallions, I looked at the spiritual meanings of each stone and decided how they would relate to each of the gods, or even played with the name of the stone. The stones are all featured in the comic's logo, which you can take a look at here. The gods of my world also play an important role even if they are currently in a deep slumber. Where did my inspiration for the pantheon come from? Mythology, specifically Greco-Roman and Japanese mythology. I've always been interested in learning about world religions and cultures, and I've been especially interested in their pantheons and how their gods are or were worshipped. I've also been interested in how they looked and were depicted in art, which leads me to my next topic, how I developed the artistic style of the comic. As you can see on the screen, my style looks kind of anime, kind of painterly, but not quite either. I drew a lot of anime in my younger years, but I didn't want my story to look like every other anime. I wanted to develop a style where down the road someone could look at something I made and go, oh, that's a Lizelle work. That's Lizelle's style. Just like the great artists of history would do master studies of previous works to learn and create their own style, I too did the same. Since we're on the topic of art history, I'll start there. I love going to museums. I love getting lost in the galleries and staring at art for hours. I'll sometimes draw in the galleries and do sketches of statues or paintings that draw my attention, or even draw my characters as if they were posed that way or in the paintings. I love medieval and Renaissance art for costume design, neoclassical and romantic art for composition and landscape, Impressionism for how light affects color, shadow, and shape, Art Nouveau for design, and mid-20th century illustration for narrative. Yeah, that's pretty eclectic, but I just love art history. My education background is in studio art and art history, so I'm kind of a nerd there. Norman Rockwell is my favorite artist. I love how he blends a realistic and comical style into his works, how he can weave a full narrative into just one composition, and how expressive his characters are with their faces and body language. I also love if he wasn't feeling a composition, he would just add a dog. I'm a dog person, so that's just a fun little tidbit for me. I love art history in general and geeking out with people over it, as you just heard from my educational background. I also love intricate architecture. Even though it's a pain in the butt to draw, it's a ton of fun to do. Anytime I travel, I take lots of pictures of beautiful buildings from multiple angles to use as reference. I could browse the internet for hours looking at pictures of castles, cathedrals, temples, and manor homes from around the world to save and add to my reference library on my computer. Looping back to my other favorite art form, Fire Emblem and The Legend of Zelda are also big artistic inspirations, particularly with Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn for Fire Emblem, and Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, and Tears of the Kingdom for Zelda. I love the line art and rendering of the official art, the way the hair is drawn, the costume designs, and how it all looks so natural. With the official art for Twilight Princess and Tears of the Kingdom, I also love how it looks like brushstrokes on paper. While the in-game models can have cel shading, the shadows have softer edges on the official art, which is what I like in my own art. A mobile game I've played for years has also been influential in costume design for me, and that's Love, Nikki. It's the most versatile dress-up game out there. I can mix and match and layer so many different styles of clothing and accessories to create something truly unique. It helps me work out some design slumps I would be in when coming up with what the different clothing styles would be in different regions in the comics world. So there you have it, my eclectic and geeky reference library of inspiration. I hope you're able to see this in the Sorcerer of Awakening, which you can check out at soa-comic.com. Are you a creative working on your own stories? What inspirations do you have? If you're an artist, what influenced your style? Feel free to share them in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for coming, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care!